the overwhelming story is a massive Labour majority, over 400 seats. And of course, with that, a total collapse in Conservative support and among their worst results in history. This is, whichever way you spin it, a very bitter defeat for the Conservatives.
And it wouldn't be breakfast without Lara Spirit, who's the editor of the Times Red Box newsletter. She's with us every morning at this time, and this momentous morning is no exception. Good morning to you, Lara.
Morning, Asma.
Can you go through some of the numbers for us and just explain how big is this? Is it fair to say it's huge, but it's not what was predicted?
Yes, I think it's fair to say it's huge. It's not what was predicted. There are pockets of difficulty for Keir Starmer in these results. It was not a night of totally smooth sailing. There will have been moments where Starmer will have been wincing, I imagine. There were a couple of defeats from those on his shadow front bench. And indeed, we came within a hair's breadth of losing Wes Streeting, of course, the shadow health secretary.
Which is mad, isn't it?
Which is completely extraordinary and will have been beyond the imagination of anyone around Keir Starmer, you would think. But nonetheless, the overwhelming story is a massive Labour majority, over 400 seats. And of course, with that, a total collapse in Conservative support and among their worst results in history. This is, whichever way you spin it, a very bitter defeat for the Conservatives. Few will try and put a positive spin on that. I think one of the interesting stories going into today, particularly for Starmer now, will be some turning their attention to the left of the party, not least because of those strong independent challenges that we saw, also because Jeremy Corbyn was elected as an independent in Islington North, and also because he has set out, I think, the main challenge to Starmer from this election, which is that turnout was down. The Labour vote share is only slightly up on 2019. It may not even be on 2017 levels. And in his view, and the view of some of those that will be challenging him and putting pressure on him in his first few days in government, this is not the resounding mandate that some on Labour think it is. And I think that will be one of the interesting challenges to watch from him in the days ahead.
Now, very quickly, before we go to what Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have said so far, the other parties, Lib Dems, as expected, surged. SNP, catastrophic for them.
Completely catastrophic for them. Literally half a dozen, just over, seats. I mean, a complete collapse in their support. And I think another reminder that when we look at this Labour victory, we do need to be quite careful about realising and remembering that it is a perfect confluence of events for them. It is a total collapse of support from the SNP in Scotland. It is a total collapse of support for the Conservative Party south of the border and indeed also north of the border. But within that, you need to, I think, understand just how those two massive self-inflicted crises that consume both the Conservative Party and the SNP party over the past year and slightly longer has contributed to this Labour success. And I think that's another reason why we just need to be slightly careful going into today, not to say that Keir Starmer is certainly on for a full decade of national renewal, as he has said he would like a mandate to have before. This is a big success, but it is one that we must still qualify.
Now, the exit poll said that, because I was up for that, perhaps foolishly, I'm slightly regretting it now. But anyway, the exit poll said Reform would get 13 seats and they've got 4 so far. And this is something that I think, again, worth watching very closely. We're still waiting for, obviously, some of the results to come in. But for Nigel Farage, he will look at his resounding victory in Clacton and I think take from that that this is a solid base from which Reform can build. Of course, he only entered the campaign, midway through. And I think even though they haven't clinched the full number of seats they were hoping for, Farage was very open about not knowing where that ceiling was. And the big story from them is the fact that they have contributed to scores more Conservative losses than would otherwise have happened. It is not that Reform...
Tell me just your assessment of the night and the sort of messages that you have been getting from MPs on all sides.
Well, look, I'd say a lot of the messages I've been getting are from people who were perhaps giddy with victory and are now quite busy preparing for roles in government. Tories were, as you'd expect, fatalistic. Senior Conservative campaign advisors in CCHQ very confused by the early results. And I'd say one of the stories of this night is inconsistency. You know, at the start of the night, yes, the exit poll has been vindicated that Labour has won very comfortably, more or less everywhere in the country. It's the biggest party in terms of seats and vote share in England, Scotland and Wales. But there are lots of pockets of bad news for the government, for the incoming government, in urban centres with lots of Liberal graduates, and also
and surprises as well. I mean, West Streeting won by what, about 400 votes?
Yeah, 528 votes, and that, for context, is just 60 votes less than his majority in 2015, when Ed Miliband was leader of the Labour Party. It's not really landslide territory.
No. And Jonathan Ashworth, of course, also lost his seat. Another shock overnight. Well, I'm here, world media all around us, crammed under their umbrellas. New Zealand TV, I've seen Al Jazeera here, France 24. We will continue to stay dry and bring you updates here live on Downing Street.
The typical majority that we're seeing this time is much, much less than it would normally. So 5 years ago, it was about 11,000. Now it's just over 6,000, which is a pretty remarkable fall. So it means that all of these seats, Starmer might have won a big majority in seat numbers, but actually at the individual constituency level, there's some very fine margins in there.
In this election, was there such a thing as a safe seat?
I don't think there was, to be honest. I mean, some of those gains that we saw from other parties, I mean, they're sort of deep into Tory territory. If you look at some of the reform ones, we had Boston and Skegness. That's a notional majority of 27,000 gone. Clacton, again, obviously another one where Nigel Farage was standing, 26,000 majority, again, gone. The front line of this campaign is well in the sort of, the Tory heartlands, the sort of 15,000, 20,000 seat majorities. So, yeah, it's been fascinating and very strange as well.
Well, yeah, very strange. There's so many stories. I think one of the stats in your piece that's online just now at thetimes.com, the average majority of a seat so far has been about 6,600 votes, down from 11,300 in 2019. And this is a section you've called Britain is becoming more marginal. Intriguing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is all, I suppose, a bit of a warning to Starmer that, it wouldn't take much for some of these forces to sort of come and upset the party. I mean, it's interesting. We're talking about Liz Truss, and obviously she's been sort of, and was talking about how she's kind of, I suppose, this figurehead for everything that's happened party in recent years. Actually, one interesting correlation we found was that Labour suppose in areas where people's set of living and inflation was a big problem. So actually, it does sort of suggest were worst affected by the cost of living crisis, swung behind Labour in the way that Starmer needed.
But other issues that have kind of jumped.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gar's other end has been deeply damaging to the Labour Party. I mean, there's so many seats on here, Leicester East, Leicester South, it's pretty comfortable. Half high Muslim, and the party's lost them. And we see that sort of pattern across the whole where their vote share has fallen in high Muslim populations.
There's Gavin Barwell, who was Theresa May's chief of staff overnight. In terms of the Conservative Party, there are three of them. The first, profile of their voters. The second one is division of the right in politics in general, although he says that merge is not any way forward as far as he's concerned. And he also mentioned tactical voting. Conservatives may have been victims of tactical voting. Can we assess how big a thing that's been?
Yeah, I mean, this will all come out eventually, but there are some early signs that actually the Lib Dems played this very, very well. So in the seats where the Lib Dems were first or second last time, they basically won. They were on 35% compared with Labour on 19%. In all other seats where the Lib Dems weren't competitive last time, they got a mere 6%, and Labour stormed ahead with 41. So basically, the Lib Dems and Labour have kind of avoided each other throughout this campaign, and it's worked brilliant for them.
Avoided each other throughout the campaign. Keep your distance. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you this morning.